My name is Ryan Bile, and I serve as the president of the Resident Student Association here at UD. We are a student government organization that represents all students living in the University of Delaware's affiliated residence halls and apartments. Our mission as an organization is to make the residence halls a home by cultivating an inclusive, engaging, diverse, and rewarding residence hall experience for all of our students. On an annual basis, we host a variety of social and educational events to strengthen the campus community and lead positive change. We are very excited to be co-hosting this town hall with Residence Life and Housing. Today on the call, we have Christina Stauffer, who serves as the Associate Director for Student Engagement and Assessment, and she'll be co-moderating the town hall with myself. We have two wonderful guest speakers, Dr. Jim Tweedy, who serves as the Director of Residence Life and Housing, and Dr. Tim Dowling, who serves as the Director of Student Health Services. Thank you both for joining us today. Before we begin, I'm just going to review the game plan for today. In a moment, I'll yield to Christina to continue our introduction and have Dr. Tweedy and Dr. Dowling introduce themselves. We'll then have a guided discussion on COVID-19, how the university is responding, and what students can expect over the next several months. Over the past week, students have submitted questions, which we'll cover today. However, if you're joining us today and you have your own question, feel free to message Christina or I, or use the raise hand feature at any time, and we'll do our best to get to your questions. If we don't get to your questions today and you have some lingering questions, feel free to let us know and we'll make sure to follow up with Dr. Dowling and Dr. Tweedy. That said, I'd like to thank you all again for coming out today and yield the floor to Christina.
Thank you, Ryan. You're incredibly good introduction. I really should take some notes from you. But I just want to take a very few minutes to introduce a little bit of how I came to collaborate with Ryan and with you all for the Resident Student Association. So as Ryan said, my name is Christina Stauffer. I've worked in Residence Life and Housing for 10 years almost, which is mind-blowing to me. And one of my most recent tasks is a ad hoc committee to do some proactive COVID-19 education on campus. Our goal is to help our students maintain a safe, healthy campus that we can stay open and also have a productive spring campus where we're able to stay open as well, and to maintain health on campus. That's really our number one goal. In doing that, we had several goals to try to achieve this. And one of those was directly communicating with students, particularly our student leaders, such as yourselves, on what some of those goals are, how we can partner with one another to do that, and where to find information so you all are informed and can help inform others. One of my goals for today is that it is a two-way street, and that you may also offer us some information as to the student experience and what we need to know to help create this reality on campus with you. So please feel free, especially since we're a small group, to feel comfortable doing that. We really do want to know. To date, we're really proud of the UD students. Our campus has been doing really well, and that's exciting. But we also know we're going into more challenges, flu season, cold weather, and potentially more people on campus. And so we still have work to do to be proactive in that way. What I'd like to call your attention to is, of course, the university's COVID-19 website, which really has any and everything a student would want to know about COVID-19 on campus. But Residence Life and Housing is also planning on adding a webpage to our website that will be specific to resident students' experience on campus with COVID-19. Specifically information about quarantine isolation housing, what to expect, how to be prepared for it, and to host some of our other campaigns that we'll be putting out. Give me a hand raise if you've seen our Ask Dr. Dowling video series at all. Ryan has. Okay, handful. If you haven't, check them out. They're really fun. They're on our social media pages, and soon we're going to host those on our website as well. And that's where we ask some just light questions to Dr. Dowling about how to navigate COVID-19 on campus. So highly recommend. It's my hope that we will continue to put these channels out to our students so that you can continue to get the information from us. So I think that website's going live today or Monday. Keep an eye out for it. And as well as some campaigns on social media. So if you don't already follow Residence Life and Housing on Instagram, I also encourage you to do that because that's where our campaigns are going to live. So with that, I will throw back, I think, to Ryan before we get started. Oh, no,
I think it goes to you for preliminary.
Perfect. Excellent. So then we'll go ahead and get started. What I would love to do is first start with our guests to ask them to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about the office that you represent, and some of the services that you provide to students. And whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first. So I'm Tim Dowling. I'm the Director of Student Health Services. I've been here at the university for about 7.5 years. I've been a family physician for over 25 years now. And so, when COVID came into play, the university relied heavily on myself in working with everyone to try and maintain the health and safety of everybody on campus. That role has not diminished at all since March and continues to move forward in a tremendous direction in hoping to get as many students back on campus for this spring, which is our main goal for coming year that we're having. So in student health services, obviously we take care of all the students from student athletes to general student population. And we also do women's health, men's health, STI testing. We have X-ray within our facility. We have now an annex, which is next to our building in the parking lot, which is 3 trailers that have been brought together where we do our COVID testing and see COVID patients in there, again, to try and keep Laurel Hall as safe as possible for students seeking care for things other than COVID or COVID-like symptoms. So, we've been very intentional about making the campus as safe as possible, but also your experience at Student Health as safe as possible. We do have the capability of doing rapid testing within the annex, and we also can send tests to the state. I've also been involved in setting up the surveillance testing that you all may have seen that happens every Monday and Wednesday here on campus. I'm very proud that the university has been able to do that, and the great faculty members and researchers who've put that together. And we have turnaround time this past Wednesday, people that got tested in the morning up until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We had all the positives notified by 4:30 in the afternoon that same day. Which is really impressive for something that's not a rapid test. So the university continues to move forward. Right now, we're doing about 1,200 tests a week. We're going to max that out at 4,000 tests once the students come back on campus this spring. And again, because of the increased density of students coming back in the springtime, we wanted to make sure that we could match the testing for the students moving forward so that we could create a safe environment for everybody. So that's my current role. I live, breathe, and eat COVID 24/7 questions, concerns. So if you have any questions, always feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be glad to answer any questions that come up regarding COVID.
Thank you so
Jim.
much.
And since Tim is on Zoom probably about 20 hours a day, he has a bit of email time. He has learned to not have his hands over like this. So good. Making good. Again, my name is Jim Tweedy. I am the Director of Residence Life and Housing, and I use pronouns he and him. And I think you probably all have a sense of what we do, but I've worked at UD for about 22 years now, and I got my diehard res lifer. I got my first res life job in 1986. So been doing this for a good long time. This has been one of a kind, and I am not going to use that word unprecedented around you folks. You've heard it enough. You've seen it enough. But what a fascinating year to a certain degree. So from a COVID perspective, we had started, I think, this academic year, or started the planning for this academic year with the idea that we would have our traditionally open residence halls, but as the national situation and as our regional situation became worse, obviously we had to reduce that dramatically, as well as with in-person classes and so. So we have a 7,300 bed operation that hosts about 1,200 students right now, in which we are hoping to go up to around 4,000 or so for spring. But with that is a lot of the things that have been a tremendous challenge for us, none more than the idea that for physical safety, we need isolation and distancing and space and things like that. our typical job in residence life is to bring people together, not only in rooms, but to bring people together interpersonally, and to help people learn from one another, to help people challenge one another, gain exposure to different constructs, concepts, frames of thinking, that kind of stuff. And so, we're working just incredibly hard to try to find other ways to do that and other means to do that. And that's part of what Christina has as part of her charge. But I think our core focus of what we're trying to achieve for our students, whether that be, kind of a significant sense of belonging in our residence hall community, sense of belonging to the university community, feeling that this is a place where they can be themselves, that they can learn from one another, that they can learn new skills. That still is with us, but we have a lot of different circumstances to work with. And frankly, when we look at spring with around 4,000 students, it is going to be a one student per room model. We are likely to continue to have a number of physical distancing requirements and expectations and things like that. So we're in a stage at this moment where we're really trying to redesign spring. And I've asked myself and I've asked my staff to look at each of these semester blocks as kind of a standalone year, to where our entire planning can change. We don't necessarily have to carry anything over from the here and now. We can start fresh and really look at spring. And so we'd be fascinated and really enjoy any sort of input, ideas, and things like that we can have from any of you and any of our students, to help improve our environment and still help meet some of the goals that we think are really important for our students in the halls. So sorry to soapbox on my intro, but that's my intro.
Hey, get all the points made. And both of you lightly introduced this idea, but I do want to give you a chance to elaborate if you feel so inclined, which is, there's the here and now, but also looking and forecasting ahead over the next few months. What would you say is the most pressing priority for your unit or for your office?
Want me to go first, Jim?
Sure thing.
Yeah, so probably the biggest thing right now, looking over the next 2 months, is in November, obviously, with Thanksgiving break coming up, making sure that the students go home safely. So, the last thing we want to do is to take someone that has COVID and put them in an environment where they're actually spreading COVID to their family members, especially over something like Thanksgiving break. So we want to make sure that we are dealing with that in the best way possible. So we're working on messaging around that information. And then obviously towards the end of the semester, as we move towards winter break, making sure, again, that students are going to get home safely. And then as we look forward towards the start of the spring semester, how do we get the students coming back on campus tested and into their residence halls, again, in a safe manner, so that we're not creating an outbreak in the first week or two of students coming back onto campus.
Okay.
So ditto Tim's components there. However, the other part that I think I want to put forward, our job right now is to try to give people enough information where they can plan. And that means we have to gather a lot of information. So our first significant priority, now that the academic calendar has been put together a few days ago, and now that we've been able to make the university announcement, is to just really get to work with our students to determine, out of all of our current contract holders, of which there's probably 6,000 or so, who still wants to be considered for on-campus housing for spring. What does that number look like? We put forward in our letter to the community that we are prioritizing first year and senior. However, there's an awful lot of sophomores and juniors who have a deep interest in here, and pretty compelling reasons to be here as well, and some in-person classes. So right now, what we are working with is that all of our constituents, students, families, community members, are all having to operate with so many unknowns that they really can't make decisions. So our job, and our most urgent job right now, is to try to kind of shrink the number of possibilities, whether they're good or bad, but to really know and let people know firmly if they're going to have a spot on campus, if they're going to have the opportunity, or if they need to be seeking something else. So I think one of our most urgent charges is to help our community members know exactly what we're able to offer, and perhaps at times what we're not able to offer.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you guys both for those introductions. We have a number of questions that were submitted by students, so I want to make sure that we get to those first. And then I see we have a couple hands raised I see you have a hand raised, Griffin. We'll get to some audience questions towards the end, just so we can get through all the questions that were pre-submitted. Jim, just like going on a roll, talking about housing, because that's what we were last talking about. Obviously, on Wednesday, President Asanas announced the university's plans for spring 2021, having far more, as it was quoted saying, in-person academic experiences, increasing residence hall capacity to approximately 60%, which would get us to about 4,000 on-campus students. Obviously, COVID is like a dynamic situation. Things are going to change, as we learned last semester. But I wanted to just give you a chance, maybe while we have this group here, to elaborate on the current plan and expand upon some of those uncertainties that you mentioned, right? So a good example of that is like students who are currently living on campus, right? Will they be able to retain their housing, or will they have to, sort of change positions coming in the next semester? So I want to give you a chance to talk about some of those topics.
Thanks, Ryan. You're just like everybody else who's calling my office right now. But so the truest answer is that we're working on it, which is not the answer that you're looking for. There is a possibility that everybody here this semester may have to move out and may have to either go to a different assignment or have to kind of work toward. Obviously, we're going to try to support those students who are currently here, but we did make a university-wide commitment to trying to get as many of our first year students their opportunity to live on campus as they can. So the very first number that we need to know is from that first year student audience, how many of those folks want to accept that invitation from us? If it's every single one of them, then the answer is going to be not everybody who's here now will have the opportunity to return. If it's 80%, then yes, we will be able to. So we are, by November 20, we'll know the answer to that question, and we will start to then be able to give with conviction solid answers to everyone else. But our first go around is to really determine who is all looking. So there's a possibility, and I have no expectation. I mean, in a typical year, 95% of our first year students who are eligible for on-campus housing will take on-campus housing. It's not going to be nearly 95% of our first year class who will do that. There will be a number of students who, based off their registration, will not have enough in-person classes for their satisfaction to where it's worth the massive investment to come here. And I think there's some students who have found that it's pretty acceptable to do the kind of Zoom life for now, and that they'll kind of recoup it for the following years. So I would expect that we're going to have a much lower number of first year students. So I hope to provide opportunities, because we do have other students who are both currently here, but we have students with significant needs to be on campus. And so we want to be able to kind of look at all of those on a case by case, and we will take our highest needs where we've offered for first year and senior, and we'll take our highest needs students from there on out. So yeah, and there's an awful lot of conditions, and I also appreciate, Ryan, that you kind of mentioned the ever-changing nature of COVID, and that's why we are able to take guidance from the real doctor and the health advisory group versus my doctorate of education.
Absolutely. And as most of us are familiar with, right, the current setup with housing has the vast majority of students in suite style setups, where it's two essentially double rooms joined by a bathroom with one student in each of those rooms. There are options, obviously, for students who are living in apartments and university affiliated housing that's more off campus, to live with a collection of friends. In the spring, right, we're currently relying on that on-campus housing that's suite style to get the capacity to have 4,000 students be on campus. Will we need to evaluate our needs or evaluate our options with more traditional style housing, the like Reddings and the South Academies of the world? And what will the restrictions in those locations look like compared to what we have currently in the suite style housing?
We have used all of our apartments in suite style, so every expansion from 1,200 up is going to be in traditional housing. So the other 27 buildings I'll be opening are all traditional. It's the Smythe Lane Thompsons, it's the Centrals, it's not even the ones with quite as much room as the ones that you initially mentioned with the Reddings and the Gilberts and all those. However, when we look at our numbers, when we start to do one student per room, we actually end up usually with like the 2 bathroom per floor kind of model, with around 6 people sharing a bathroom. It won't be a perfect ratio like that, but it reduces the number of people using a public bathroom quite a bit. This is where we're going to look for some of your ideas as well, because we had talked to some schools who tried to do a bathroom schedule. We don't think it's going to quite work. Perhaps we can have a kind of a floor basic agreement in terms of, if they want to trade off shower times or things like that, fine. But, we aren't going to have potty times and all that. But we're going to also equip outside of every bathroom, certainly hand sanitation, but we're also looking to have, kind of one of those big tanks of wipes that you'll see at the hardware store when you walk in, and beg our students to not flush them down the toilets. So we're gonna have to kind of reframe the infrastructure of the bathroom a bit so that students can protect themselves. The custodial crew will certainly be hitting contact surfaces at a much higher frequency than they typically have done. However, it's going to require, I think, when we work with our staff and we work with our students, to look at this idea of this kind of collective protection of the floor, and that students are going to have to look out for one another and be on the care for one another with their own behavior and their own personal protection as well. And those are the kind of things that we approach. And I think, as Christina mentioned, we've been really proud of our students so far. And I actually think that they're going to put forward their best character for one another. And that's what I'm really, really counting on.
Thank you for those updates. Jim, I appreciate hearing, right, that the expected ratio, right, for students to bathroom is only down to about 6. That's a lot lower than I was anticipating. So that's good to hear. I want to give Dr. Dowling a chance to talk about, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
I said our floors actually get pretty small when we're not tripling. So yeah, we can actually, it spreads out pretty evenly. Now I'll shut up.
No, thank you for those updates. I want to give Dr. Dowling a chance as well to address some of the expected changes that we're going to be seeing hopefully within the next couple months into the beginning of spring 2021. So, same kind of vein, right? Like COVID is a dynamic situation, plans change, but how will the services offered by Student Health Services look different in the coming semester? And specifically, what is the university's plan to expand our testing and tracing capacity? And are you doing anything currently to prepare for the eventual distribution of a vaccine?
Lots of great questions there. So yes, as anybody that may have been on campus already this year and has engaged with us, we have shifted to a appointment only prospect. So basically our doors are locked 24 hours a day. The only way you get in is with an appointment, and we actually send somebody out to screen you before you even enter the building. So answering that Qualtrics symptom checker and getting that green check mark is the first thing that we do in looking at whether or not someone can get into our building. Obviously, if you're sick, you're going to get a red X anyway. And so we have a well entrance, which faces the green. And then the parking lot side, which faces South College, we have a sick entrance. And then also that parking lot side, we have the annex for people that have COVID-like symptoms. So that is a big change for us. We are also not open 24/7. People that, most of you are not freshmen, your upper years. In the past, we've had nurses in our building 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That has changed, and that's not a change necessarily because of COVID. That's a change from a financial standpoint and a service standpoint, so that we could expand more services through counseling and psychology, which shares our fee. So the well-being fee is shared between us, student wellness, health promotion, and the counseling department. So in order to make adjustments so that we could help get more counselors for students, that was some of the changes that we had planned to institute this academic year anyway. So our services are exactly the same though, with the addition of COVID testing. So within our annex building, we have both rapid COVID testing, which we can do in about 15 minutes and give you an answer. But we also have COVID testing that we can send out to the state and also get the state to give us the results of that. But all the rest of the services that we've had before, like I said in the beginning, women's health, men's health, smoking cessation, nutrition services, as well as lab services we continue to have within our building and will continue to utilize, as well as our dispensary. So moving into the spring semester, obviously increasing the amount of testing is going to be very important. And that's why we worked on a plan to actually be able to get the testing up to about 4,000 per week. It'll actually end up being a little over 4,000 a week once we get into a rhythm there, but it's going to be about 4,000 a week. And then the other issue that you had brought up, I think, was vaccine. So vaccines are going to be interesting. Right now, there is no approved vaccine. They are moving things through quickly. And so how it gets approved will depend on the availability of vaccines. So if it gets approved under an emergency utilization authorization, or EUA, then that will be limited on who can get that vaccine. And most likely universities will not have access to that vaccine. If it gets through the FDA as a fully approved vaccine, then they're going to be broken down, from my understanding of everything I'm reading, into 3 tiers. So tier 1 is going to be first responders and healthcare workers are going to be the first people that will get that vaccine. After that, it's going to be high-risk people. So your elderly, people that have underlying health conditions are going to be the next group. And then the 3rd tier is going to be everyone else. As of right now, they have not done a lot of trials that include children under the age of 12. They're starting those now. So obviously young kids still won't be getting the vaccine when the vaccine first becomes available. We are anticipating at the earliest somewhere over the winter that it becomes the beginning aspects, or the tier 1 people should be getting it. The general population, we're anticipating somewhere around summertime before we actually start seeing the vaccine widely available to the general public. Most likely it's going to be 2 vaccines or 2 inoculations during the about a month apart, is from everything I'm reading. And then the big question is, will there be an annual vaccine after that, sort of like the flu shot? So I would anticipate that that answer is going to be yes, that this is going to be an annual vaccine similar to a flu shot. And then once it's been out for a while and a large number of people have gotten that vaccine and it's shown to be safe, you may see that it's combined with the flu vaccine and actually given as one shot for each flu season. So I don't anticipate a high vaccine rate over this spring semester. And really, we're going to need to get somewhere around 70% of the people to get the vaccine before we can actually start thinking about reducing and restrictions that we currently have in place, which are masks and physical distancing. You know, what we're doing now, I would expect the spring is going to be, if that goes successful, that we're going to repeat whatever happens in the spring in next fall semester, and probably for the whole academic year next year.
Thank you so much for that context. Obviously, vaccines are like far, far, far into the future. If we even get one that's effective. I do want to focus more so on like what's most relevant at this point in time, which is like testing and tracing, right? So there are currently 1,000 students, approximately, give or take, who are living in university-affiliated residence halls and apartments, and we're doing about 1,000 tests every single week on campus. However, there are approximately 6,000 students who are living off campus in apartments and townhouses across the Newark community. So if we're looking, as Jim mentioned, right, to expand our on-campus population to about 60% come spring 2021, that'll leave us with, if the numbers stay approximately where they're at now, about 10,000 students on campus who will be tested approximately, if you tested all of those equitably, every 2.5 weeks or so for doing 4,000 tests a week. So I wanted to just get your professional opinion and get some more context. How much, asymptomatic surveillance testing is truly necessary for a population like UD? And is it within the university's capability to eventually test every student at least once a week, as many of our peer institutions have been doing?
Great question. And that is a pretty high bar to get to that point. So a lot of what we call our peer institutions have something that we don't have. The vast majority actually have a medical school on their campus and usually a hospital system also associated with their campus. So they have a lot more resources from a medical standpoint than what we have at the university. I can tell you that currently we've tested about 7,000 people, faculty, staff, and students on campus. And that's through our surveillance testing so far this year. And our positive percentage rate has been about 1.7%, which is actually very good from a surveillance standpoint. We'd like to see it below 1%. If we get below 1%, then that allows us the ability to start pooling testing samples. And in doing pooling, we can actually expand the number of tests that we do tremendously. So there is capability of actually being able to test everybody on campus once a week if we get to the point where we get the surveillance testing below 1%. So there is that capability. It does require a lot of work, and I'm not going to say it's a lot of work by the students necessarily, but by everybody in the University of Delaware community. And that's making sure that you follow the guidelines in place, not only while you're on campus, but also while you're off campus. And what we've seen for this whole semester is that while students are in classrooms or working in labs, and faculty and staff are on campus, they're doing a great job. And we're not seeing spread within the campus itself. Where we're seeing spread is when people go to a friend's house and they go to a party, whether it's a family party or it's a party that's a social gathering of non-family members, or even people just entering a house and sitting around and talking with their friends in a house and they take their mask off. That is where we're seeing people getting positive tests from. So when we get a positive test on off-campus housing, usually what ends up happening is within a short period of time, everybody in that house is positive. And that is true not just for students at the University of Delaware, but across the nation. So I don't want to say that this is something that the students are doing wrong. This is what everyone's doing wrong. And that's why I've been saying since September, if you are out of your normal house, you need to wear a mask all the time because that's the best way to help protect people. I can say that as far as student health services for contact tracing and isolation with our partnership that we have with Res Life and Housing, we've done a tremendous job. So we've actually been able to contact trace over 422 students that tested positive. And we've actually been able to manage 722 students that have ended up in quarantine because of close contact, not necessarily ending up having COVID, but because they had close contact with somebody. So we do have that capability of actually managing this quite well. At our peak on the campus, we had 105 active cases, and that's for off-campus and on-campus students. And we had 206 students that were actively in quarantine, again, off-campus and on-campus total. So my staff has that capability to manage a larger number of students because we were able to do that quite easily. It made for long days and it made lots of work, but we were able to manage it and handle it fairly well. So moving into the spring, I think we'll be able to deal with the increased number of testing, be able to contact trace quickly and efficiently. Obviously, the more the students actually do testing here on campus, whether it's utilizing our surveillance testing or utilizing our annex and getting tested through student health services, the faster and more efficiently we can get them diagnosed and get them into the proper areas and get the people that were exposed to them into quarantine as quickly as possible. And that should help control the spread of COVID through the spring semester. So it does take a lot of cooperation. And so we want to make sure that we're as available as we can be for our students.
Absolutely. I want to ask a brief follow-up just about the off-campus population. And as you mentioned, right, we're seeing most cases of community spread in those areas where students, don't have as much accountability. The, socialization around wearing masks isn't as strong, I presume, right? So why hasn't the testing strategy for UD, right? If we're thinking about the university's visibility of students who have COVID in the population that's, on campus, why hasn't a testing strategy focused more predominantly on those populations where community spread might be more popular? And what is the current breakdown for testing that's happening on campus students versus off campus students and faculty? Like, what are our percentages at?
Yeah, so percentages as far as on-campus and off-campus students, I won't be able to give you that because I can't break that down. I haven't broken that down. I probably could, but I haven't at this point. But what I can say as far as testing, we have targeted testing for off-campus students by sending out, every Sunday, we send out an email or a newsletter to the students. And it talks about that Wednesdays are basically free testing days, meaning that anybody can walk up and get tested at either one of our two sites that we have, whether you live on campus or off campus. As far as people being invited, we were given a pool of people. It was students that live on campus, as well as students that have face-to-face classes. And so those were our targeted students that we wanted to make sure that we were getting them tested because we knew they were going to be on campus on a regular basis. So that was our initial target. Then as we saw that we have capability for testing more students, we expanded it out and opened it up for the students that are living off campus. We are currently exploring a way for, so there's off-campus housing called the Waverly, which is pretty far from campus. And we're looking to see if we can actually send buses down there to do testing off-site. So that's something that next month we're going to try and pilot that program to see if we can actually get students that live far off campus and may not be engaging as often on campus to make it easier for them to get tested.
Yeah, I heard a rumor about the mobile component for testing, which is really, I think that's really important, bringing the testing to the students instead of asking them to go on campus. Just to confirm though, so the breakdown of what percentage of tests are being taken by students who are living in residence halls versus off-campus students and faculty is unknown at the current point in time?
But I wouldn't say it's unknown. I mean, I haven't done that research yet. So obviously I see all the numbers of the students that are getting tested as well as faculty and staff. I get every test result for the surveillance testing. But I haven't, if I had enough time in my life, I could probably sit there and break down all that information. Also, with the understanding that the UDSIS system does not always have the most up-to-date addresses for all students. It makes it difficult because there's quite a few, especially for the upper year students that have last year's address in there, which means that it shows for some of them on-campus housing. So that would skew the numbers the wrong way because the UDSIS system has not been updated with your most current address. So it would take some time for us to actually get through that process to do that search. And I just don't have the manpower. We're too busy trying to make sure the people that are sick are getting the right care identified and maintaining the people that are in quarantine to get them into quarantine as best as possible.
Thank you. And I have one more question for you, Dr. Dowling, not
Sure.
related to testing or tracing. Prior to COVID-19, the student well-being fee was $227. It's currently, I believe I have this correct, $352 for students. Can you highlight just briefly what those fee dollars have been used for and whether we anticipate, in the near to, midterm, those fees being reduced back to their original rate?
So I can start with I'll work backwards. The fees will probably never go back to the original rate. And so what happened about, I want to say about 6 years ago, the student health fee was actually reduced by $27 a semester. And so in doing so, the idea was that we had some reserves that, and it was used to burn down our reserves, but also to help maintain at that time the fees overall and the cost overall for coming to the University of Delaware to stay flat that year. That fee was supposed to be reduced only for about 2 years, and then it was supposed to be reevaluated and increased. So now you move forward 6 years later, and our fee was never moved back up. So we were running over a $2 million deficit annually for the last 3 years. And so in doing so, that caused us to not be able to expand the services, especially for counseling that we needed for our students. And so this is really a readjustment of the fee to where it should have been properly adjusted to. Prior to that, usually there was a fee increase of anywhere from 1% to 3% annually. And so if you take that time and you say that we froze it for 6 years with no increase and actually showed a reduction of the fee of over 10% at that time, that created quite a deficit for us. And we wanted to make sure that we could give the services that we felt we really needed, which was specifically counseling and psychological services for our students. And so it was made, this decision was made actually before COVID even happened, that this academic year we were going to be increasing the student health fee, or the student well-being fee as we renamed it, to actually reflect the 3 offices that it actually helps. So it not only helps student health services, it helps the counseling department, as well as student wellness and health promotion. So all 3 departments are actually supported by that fee, and that's our only source of income to help maintain and run the services that we supply to you students.
Thank you so much for that update. I know we talked about that at one of the Student Life Advisory Board meetings, so I wanted to make sure everyone here had that context. So great. With the remaining 15 minutes that we have, I know I still have more questions, but because we have a decent audience here of students who are living on campus, I want to give you guys a chance to ask Dr. Dowling and Dr. Tweedy some questions. So if you want to use the raise hand feature, you can throw your hand up, and Christina and I will sort of work through the list and yield the floor to you guys, or you can just leave a message in the chat and we can address those questions as they come up. So I want to start with Griffin, who's had his hand up for basically the whole meeting, and give him a chance to ask his question to the team.
Sorry about that. And thank you guys for giving us some input on like the upcoming semester and like what to expect, So going off basically what you're saying, right, is that like we have, I believe on November 9th, we have spring course registration coming up. And I know how you guys said, your guys are planning to have hopefully, more students come on campus, I believe, yeah. So my thing is that some students are want to be on campus, to take some classes, but when it comes time, and I believe we don't find out if you said until November 20th around there, students come on campus or not. What should students do for scheduling, including myself? Should we schedule to be online again on campus? How should we go about scheduling? Because some students, that's my thing. I don't know if I should schedule, hoping I'll be back in class, online, I'm just not sure.
And Griffin, I think that's an outstanding point. I mean, quite frankly, the way we've initially looked at this, you're talking a good chicken and the egg conversation. We're looking at this that people need to have kind of a sense of the registration in order to make a decision about housing. But the way you're framing it is that they kind of have to have a sense about housing in order to successfully do the registration. And right now we've tried to leave our, kind of that interest state for our students to coincide with registration. I'm not even quite sure how to give you guidance about how to play out that approach in terms of if you were to select your classes based off the idea of being on campus versus not. So that's what I'll probably email you, but we'll also try to include in our letter here that we're getting ready to release on Monday. We'll try to address some notes in there as well in terms of how to play that, because we were looking at it, I think, one directionally from the idea that the classes would help drive the decision for housing versus the housing driving the decision for classes. So I very much appreciate the question.
Jim, to that end, and because this was a decision the last time, has there been any decision of if a student is registered for an on-campus or in-person class, would that give them any kind of priority in the process?
It
Or-
prioritizes them, but it won't necessarily guarantee them right now. So in the fall, it guaranteed them. Right now, we would say it prioritizes you over other students, but we're not prepared. We won't be prepared until around the 20th or so to give out any more firm kind of guarantees until we have knowledge there. Again, as I mentioned, we have probably 6,000 potential with 4,000 we can offer.
So you said something not to speak about it, possibly like addressing students about this situation.
Yeah, Griffin, we're planning on sending a letter to all students who hold a residence hall contract, that the ones who are here or not here. We are hoping to send it out on Monday. We've got our drafts done, but now your question is going to make me need to go back and kind of rethink a couple areas, which I appreciate. And then it's over to our communications office. And as soon as they release it back to us, we would like to get this out to all of our students on Monday with a lot more information about the housing program and to kind of lay out the way in which we're asking people to want to get us information, but also some more information that we want to give about housing. The university letter to the community was already too long, so we didn't want to include a mountain of stuff about housing. So we've got our own 2-page letter for you all coming.
Great question, Griffin. Thank you. I know I'm in my final year, senior year. I gotta like get all my classes set so I can graduate on time and peace out. So that's pressing. It's coming up, even more so for our on-campus students. Questions from the rest of the audience. Feel free to drop a message in the chat. I see Sai has a question. For those who deferred housing to spring, will their housing preferences be accommodated, or does the process start all over again, essentially?
We are going to try to accommodate as many housing preferences as we can, but there is a possibility that we'll have to do some start over points. And this also goes exactly with the same question that the people who are up on North Campus right now are asking us, that will they get to stay? And it's like, well, maybe you wouldn't have been assigned there in the first place, that your original housing preference was going to be somewhere else. So we have some negotiations, I think, to have with our current fall students as well as our other students. And the other part too that we're not offering right now, regretfully, is the capacity to say, let's say if you requested a suite, to have who would have been your roommate in the other suite. We'll try to make that work in some situations, but we aren't going to be able to have a roommate request, a friend request, or that kind of thing happen in the system. And we'll probably be able to make some exceptions there, but very few.
Okay, we have a question from, I want to pronounce this right, Anaya, is that right?
That's right.
Hopefully. Yes, great. Her question is about, do you know when you will be contacting RAs about their positions?
I would estimate right around November 20, right, either just before the Thanksgiving break or just immediately after. We recognize, and we'll probably start making some prelim contacts even a couple of weeks before, I would say mid-November, to at least get a sense of continued interest, because we are going to need to know out of the people who either deferred or were deferred for spring, if they still maintain their interest, and if not, we may have to go out and do some brand new hiring for spring as well. So I would anticipate probably, what day of the month are we in now? About the 17th, 18th, or 20th, somewhere around there. So I would say mid-November, we should be reaching out to our current staff to get a sense of intentions. And then for the rest of our RAs, if we have any rest of you here, your placement, if you're here working for us now, is also up for possible changes too, because we're going to have to look at the spring semester as kind of a brand new start of a year, rather than what we put together for fall.
Great. Sarah messaged me a question. In the email the other day, it said first year and seniors would be prioritized for housing. Does first year mean only freshmen, or does it refer to all incoming students?
All incoming. Now, yes, but we will obviously, I think, we're debating those admissions right now, quite frankly. It's a little bit in the weeds, but we have deferred admits, certainly in that group of students. And then we also have brand new applications to the institution. The brand new applications to the institution, we are discussing whether or not we'll be able to accommodate them because they currently do not have housing applications. They weren't able to. We closed the process. So we are discussing that group, I think next week with admissions to see how we want to address them and how to be fair to our current contract holders.
Any additional questions, feel free to raise your hand or leave them in the chat and we can get to them. While we're talking about housing assignments, I had a follow-up just about, you know, how we're grouping students in the residence hall spaces. As you know, right, we have a lot of living and learning communities for honors students and for engineering students and for nursing students. What does the, you know, distribution of living and learning communities look like right now? And what do you anticipate it looking like in spring?
I should make Christina answer the question, but I'll give it a shot. She'll correct me. Right now, it has no semblance of anything. I mean, for the 1,200 students we have right now, that was not a consideration for any of the assignments. For spring, we would anticipate trying to maintain our first year honors community in terms of its typical location at Reading. Depending how many of those students come back with one per room, they won't all fit in Reading. So it's likely that they'll have to be looking at the Gilberts, Harringtons of the world as well, and have a more distributed group of our first year honors. I hope to be able to attend to our nursing program as much as we can. They've been, I think, a pretty incredible, powerful community. I don't think we will see a priority this time around for the bio or Earth, Ocean, Environment groups that typically have taken a big chunk of South Academy. So I think probably the 2 or 3 living learning communities that have had, I think, the most success in their programs, most success for the students, and that would be, again, honors to a degree, nursing, and then certainly the World Scholars are still hoping to maintain a sense of their community, and I think the World Changers are certainly still interested in trying to keep some together. So they will be, we will do our best, but we're not making any promises to those groups right now either, given the, I guess, lack of information we have about our final numbers.
And truthfully, we haven't heard from those coordinators what their plans for spring are in terms of their course offerings, in-person gatherings themselves. So we don't know what interest from the coordination exists at this point either, because they only heard the announcement on Wednesday as well.
What do we want to put forward? It's not like the university and all of us as stakeholders have known everything. We just waited to put a letter out to you all. It's like we kind of get the information maybe a day or two sometimes right when the letter goes out. So the letter goes out, and that's when all of our planning starts to come. So this is still pretty fresh for us. We've known, you know, this is one of the possibilities of many, but this is time for us now to really get to work and start to put the things together for you all.
It's good to hear. I don't want to give myself the last word, so I think we have time for like one more question from our audience. If anyone else has something they would like to ask.
If there's something you want us to know about the student experience as we are making these plans, because they really are still in flux, we're all ears too.
If you don't get the room you want, it's Dr. Tim Dowling's.
That's tdowling@yale.edu.
I'll put his cell number in the chat.
Jim, someone asked if the courtyards
Go ahead, Christine.
Oh, that's fine. Someone asked if the courtyard apartments will be affected by our planning.
Yes. Yes. We may have to end up having more first-year students over there, and have to also look at the current group of first-year students we have. We're also in the final evaluation in terms of how many set-aside beds we have in terms of COVID operations and things like that. So yeah, there will be some impact in courtyards, maybe less so in One Easton, but the same goes for the folks living in apartments as it is for a traditional residence hall, that your contract is for one semester. And we may have to do some moves. And so again, we will work with everybody. We are not going to be disrupting anybody's lives when we absolutely don't have to on such thing. We know these are really important issues, and it's not done for administrative ease. I can promise you that. So we are having to look at, again, trying to prioritize the number of students that the institutions asked us to, and the apartments come into play with that too.
I got one more question from Sarah in the chat about priority for students. Will students who are on sports teams also be included in that group that is prioritized?
Students who are on sports teams, particularly those who are actually competing. So part of our information and part of our coordination also goes with what the Colonial Athletic Association is doing, and they have announced at least what teams, I believe, but they've not necessarily announced their schedules and not fully announced every detail. So we will be meeting with athletics over the next couple of weeks to determine, which of their teams will be in competition mode versus which of their teams are just here for training. So certainly the ones in competition mode, we will absolutely prioritize, and we will start to work down our scales from there. We had a pretty significant number of student athletes on campus this fall as well, even with the no competitive approach. But we also, I think from what I've heard, is that a number of the typical fall sports may be moved to spring at this point. So we have a pretty high number of, I think, athletes who may need to be here in terms of performing their roles.
Right. I also don't want the last word. So I want to make one plug before I give it to you to be the last word, which is to wrap up sort of, again, what my personal goal for this collaboration was to hear from the students what their questions are, hopefully answer them, and then make a gentle plea to ask you to amplify what you heard today to your peers. Because one of our challenges, of course, in a normal year is getting access to students and through the noise of all of the things that they get on a daily basis from the university. And then we can't even see them in person, right? So it's that much more challenging. And I took some notes from what was being talked about of the biggest things you can amplify for us, which is this idea around Thanksgiving safety. So how to have our students leave safely and return safely if that's their hope. The importance of filling out those forms for residence life and housing so that we have an accurate count of what students' intentions are so that we can plan quickly and get the information back out to you all as soon as humanly possible. And then, of course, following the COVID guidelines and safety precautions. And so I would ask if you all in your RSA meetings or any student is welcome to email me. I'll put my email in the chat here. If you have other things that you're feeling are unclear or students just don't know about, because the goal of our committee is to amplify communication and education on campus. And so it helps us so much to know what's unclear so we can work through that. So those would be my asks of this group as we sort of end today, that you're able to help us spread that message. And Ryan, yeah, if we have any final questions, feel free before we end up.
Going off of that, the best way to amplify student voices at UD is to get involved, particularly resident student voices, is to get involved with RSA. I'm going to paste some details in the chat for you guys. If you're interested, if you're not already a member of RSA, if you're interested in getting involved with the Resident Student Association, you can go to our website, sites.udel.edu/RSA. It's listed there. We host weekly meetings from 7 to 8 p.m. on Tuesdays at the Zoom code that's listed in the chat. Feel free to stop by, whether you're living on campus, whether you're living off campus, if you're an RA, if you're a staff member at UD, you can find a home with RSA, and we want to be there to support you guys. So hopefully you guys found this conversation valuable today. Thank you so much, Dr. Tweedy and Dr. Dowling, for coming out today. We really appreciate your time. We appreciate everyone's time for engaging this conversation. So have a great Friday, great weekend, and RSA members, I will see you next week on Tuesday.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
See you.
Ryan, Christina, thank you very, very much.